Robert Hichens was a solicitor in Falmouth in Cornwall. Before the war, he had raced at Le Mans 3 times. In 1942, the Royal Navy gave him a wooden gunboat with no torpedoes on it and sent him into the English Channel to fight the fastest attack craft Germany had. The boat was called a motor gunboat. It was built of plywood and mahogany in yacht yards by men who in peacetime made furniture. It ran on petrol, which meant one hit in the wrong tank would set it on fire. It carried no armour worth the name, and where a motor torpedo boat of the same size and the same hull carried 2 torpedoes, this one carried none at all. The tubes had not been damaged or removed for repair or left ashore to save weight. They had never been fitted. Somebody at the Admiralty had looked at a torpedo boat and decided to build one without torpedoes. The Royal Navy did not think much of the men who took these boats to sea either. Coastal forces had been neglected for 20 years, and the Admiralty regarded the branch as more of an annoyance than an asset. Its officers were volunteer reservists, solicitors, shipping clerks, weekend sailors. There was a saying in the service: the Royal Navy were gentlemen and seamen. The reserve were seamen, but not gentlemen. The volunteer reserve, Hichens's branch, were gentlemen trying to be seamen. That branch finished the war, having fought more than 900 actions and sunk around 400 enemy vessels. Its crews were awarded roughly 3,000 decorations, including 4 Victoria Crosses. More than any other branch of the Royal Navy, this is the story of the motor gunboat. A wooden boat with the torpedoes deliberately left off, crewed by amateurs, in a branch its own navy had spent 20 years ignoring, that took the English Channel back from the German Navy. But the decision to remove the torpedoes was not stupidity, and it was not a shortage. It was the correct answer to a problem the Royal Navy had spent 2 years failing to solve. To understand it, you have to start with what was killing British ships in the narrow seas, and why nothing Britain already owned could catch it. When France fell in June 1940, Germany inherited the entire coastline from Norway to the Spanish border. Within weeks, German fast attack craft were operating out of Cherbourg, Boulogne, and Ostend. From those ports, every coastal convoy running up and down the east coast of England was inside their reach. The boats were called Schnellboote. The Royal Navy called them E-boats. They were around 100 feet long, and they were better than anything Britain had at sea in that class. The reason was mostly hull shape and fuel. German designers used a round bilge hull. British designers used a hard chine, which is a hull with a sharp angle where the bottom meets the side. In flat water, the hard chine is fast. In a short, steep sea, which is what the Channel produces most of the year, it pounds. The crew take a beating, the structure takes a beating, and the boat has to slow down. The round bilge hull did not pound in the same way. An E-boat could hold around 40 knots in weather that forced British boats to throttle back or stay in harbour. Time after time, German flotillas went out on nights when the British could not follow. The second difference was the engines. The E-boats ran on diesel, British boats ran on petrol. Diesel gave the Germans far greater range, and it did not turn the boat into a bomb when a round went through a tank. It was also quieter. A German boat could come in on a convoy at low revolutions and be very hard to hear. Against that, Britain sent motor torpedo boats. They were fast, they carried 2 torpedoes, and for defense, they carried a pair of rifle-caliber machine guns. That was the whole argument. When a British torpedo boat met a German boat carrying 20mm cannon, the exchange was not a fight. It was one side being shot at, and the torpedoes were no answer either. A torpedo runs at a set depth. It is designed to strike a ship with a deep hull below the waterline and break it. An E-boat drew very little water, moved at 40 knots, and turned hard. Firing a torpedo at one was close to pointless. British boats were carrying as their main armament the one weapon that could not touch the target they were most likely to meet. So the Royal Navy had a boat that could not catch the enemy in bad weather, could not outshoot him in good weather, and whose principal weapon was useless against him in any weather. The answer, when it came, was to stop pretending the torpedoes mattered. If the enemy could not be torpedoed, he had to be shot. And if he had to be shot, then everything that was not a gun was weight that could come out. The tubes came off. The torpedoes came off. What went in their place was gun armament heavier than anything of that size had carried before. A short motor gunboat of 71.5 feet mounted a 2-pounder forward, a twin 20mm aft, and twin machine guns on either beam. The bigger Fairmile boats carried 6-pounders. The guns were power-operated, which mattered more than the caliber. A man cranking a mounting by hand on a boat doing 40 knots in a seaway cannot follow a target. A powered mounting can. A tactical idea was equally plain, and it was not to sink E-boats. It was to be in the way. An E-boat had to close to short range to fire torpedoes at a convoy. At short range, a gunboat could hurt it badly. So the gunboats put themselves between the Germans and the merchant ships and made the approach expensive. A German commander who turned away without firing had been beaten, even though nothing had been sunk. Robert Hichens was among the first to take these boats out, and the first officer of the Volunteer Reserve to command a motor gunboat at all. He later became the first reserve officer to command a flotilla. He had no naval career behind him. He had a law practice, 3 starts at Le Mans, and a great deal of experience of small boats in bad weather off Cornwall, which turned out to be the relevant qualification. What he worked out and taught was that the boats were most dangerous when they were quiet. Petrol engines could be throttled right down. A gunboat, idling at low speed in the dark, engines barely turning, was very difficult to see and almost impossible to hear. Hichens would lie in wait on the convoy routes, silent and stopped, let the German boats come past, and open fire at a range where plywood and light plating gave no protection to anybody. That is the whole of it. No new technology, no secret weapon. A boat with the torpedoes taken out, more guns than the enemy expected, and a reserve officer who had decided that the correct place to fight was so close that the German advantages in speed and seakeeping stopped mattering. Through 1942 and 1943, the balance in the narrow seas turned over. Part of it was numbers. Britain could build these boats in yacht yards and furniture works across the country, and did, in quantity. Germany was building U-boats and capital ships, and never produced fast attack craft on a comparable scale. Part of it was radar. British coastal forces boats began carrying sets that let them find the enemy in darkness and fog. German boats went most of the war without radar, which meant that by 1943 they were increasingly fighting an opponent who could see them when they could not see him. And part of it was simply that the German boats stopped wanting the fight. The purpose of an E-boat was to sink merchant ships. Once every approach to a convoy meant a gun action against boats built for nothing else, the arithmetic stopped working. German commanders began breaking off rather than closing. The clearest demonstration came on the night of the Normandy landings. German fast attack craft came out from the French ports to attack the invasion fleet, which was the most target-rich piece of water in the history of naval warfare. Coastal Forces boats formed the screen on the flanks. The German boats were intercepted repeatedly and driven off. Hichens did not see it. On the night of the 12th to 13th of April 1943, in an action off the Dutch coast, a single shell hit his boat and killed him instantly. He was 34. He had been recommended for the Victoria Cross 2 months earlier for going alongside a burning gunboat to take off her crew, and had argued against his own nomination on the grounds that he had risked 2 boats to save 1. He finished as the most decorated officer the Volunteer Reserve ever had. 2 Distinguished Service Orders, 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, 3 mentions in dispatches. A solicitor from Falmouth. The final accounting for coastal forces is around 400 enemy vessels sunk, including 48 E-boats, for the loss of 170 of their own boats. The men who crewed them averaged 21 years of age, in wooden hulls full of high-octane petrol and ammunition at night in the Channel. The branch the Admiralty had called more of an annoyance than an asset came out of the war with more decorations for gallantry than any other part of the Royal Navy.
And the boat that did it
was the one they had taken the Torpedoes out of. If you want the other case, where the Royal Navy was handed a weapon that worked and refused to use it, there is one that goes further. A mortar that killed submarines roughly 10 times better than the weapon it replaced, and which captains left alone for the best part of a year, until the Admiralty had to order them to explain in writing why they had not fired it.